The billionaire sat frozen, his gaze locked on the moment unfolding before him. A young black waitress gently allowed his disabled son to dance. That single gesture would change both of their lives forever. A heavy silence cloaked Kingsley's, Manhattan's most exclusive fine dining establishment, as if the very air understood that something sacred was about to happen. Conversations died mid-sentence. Cutlery paused in mid-air. Dozens of heads turned to the small clearing between tables, where something far more important than dinner was taking shape. Lucas Montgomery, his son, was visibly trembling, the metal braces on his legs faintly rattling as he shifted forward. His hands reached out, uncertain but eager, toward Diana Johnson, the only black waitress on staff and someone who had long mastered the art of going unnoticed. The pianist had just begun a soft, almost dreamlike melody, and Lucas felt an impulse he hadn't acted on in years, the desire to invite someone to dance. "Sir, please control your son," a voice hissed from a nearby table, filled with discomfort at the breach of formality. The manager, Mr. Thornton, snapped the moment with his sharp tone. "This is not a ballroom. Our staff are here to serve, not to entertain children." He turned toward their table. "Richard Montgomery, founder of Montgomery Investments. Surely you understand." Richard Montgomery, one of the wealthiest men in the country, swallowed hard. This was the first time he had taken Lucas out to dine in public since the accident. 2 years ago, a single miscalculated turn left Lucas partially paralyzed. Richard had blamed himself ever since. He wasn't about to make another mistake. "Sit down," he ordered, low and firm. His words weren't loud, but everyone heard the weight behind them. Diana remained frozen. Her eyes flicked from the manager to the billionaire, unsure who she was really answering to. Lucas, meanwhile, kept his arm extended, unwavering. For 5 years, Diana had perfected the art of invisibility, a necessary skill when serving clients like the Montgomerys. But today, something inside her shifted. "Thornton," she said calmly, "I'm going. My shift is over." Her voice was steady as she untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the tray beside her. And then, before anyone could stop her, she turned to Lucas, smiled gently, and took his hand. "I can't dance while wearing an apron," she said with quiet warmth. Richard bolted upright, his chair screeching back. "What do you think you're doing?" Diana didn't flinch. She met his gaze head-on. "I'm accepting the invitation, sir." Before anyone could step in, Lucas pushed himself forward. His legs wobbled under the weight, the metal braces groaning with each step. Diana didn't guide or assist him. She simply matched his pace, walking beside him like a partner, not a helper. She's definitely getting fired tomorrow," whispered a woman seated nearby, half in shock, half in awe. But Richard didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere, replaying a memory of his late wife, Elizabeth, twirling Lucas around their living room. "Perfection isn't the point," she had said, smiling. "Connection is." Diana watched as Lucas moved, slow and unsteady. But in his eyes she saw something shift. Fear gave way to fierce focus. And shame began to melt into something else. Pride. For the first time since the accident, no one was correcting him, guiding him, or holding him back. Lucas was leading. "Mr. Montgomery," the manager's voice cut in, pulling Richard back. "Anchors. I assure you this kind of behavior will not happen again." "She will be disciplined," Thornton finished firmly. But Richard remained silent. The entire restaurant held its breath, waiting for his decision. After all, Richard Montgomery's word could end careers in a heartbeat. Every server froze. Diners looked on, equal parts judgmental and captivated. But Richard heard none of it. All he could focus on was Lucas's laughter, light, unburdened, echoing through the restaurant as Diana gently helped him back to his seat after 3 clumsy but joyful steps. "Thank you for inviting me," she said softly to Lucas, her tone respectful, as if speaking to an honored guest. "It's an honor," she said quietly. As Diana turned to leave, Richard suddenly spoke. His voice sounded unfamiliar, almost foreign to his own ears. What's her full name? Deanna Johnson, sir, the waiter responded gently. Richard nodded slowly, repeating the name under his breath as if committing it to memory. Then, without hesitation, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. Give this to her. My office. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The restaurant, once again, held its breath. Dinah accepted the card without a word. Her face remained composed, but her hands betrayed a subtle tremor. Dad? Lucas called softly as she walked away. Where did you do that? The question lingered in the air like a challenge. For a moment, Richard didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on his son, not with authority but with recognition. He no longer saw just the fragile child Elizabeth had left him to raise. He saw a person, a young man, someone he had failed to understand. For years. And as dinner limped along in an awkward hush, no one noticed Diana's last look before she exited, not of bitterness, but of clarity, a quiet strength beneath her calm expression, the kind of peace that storms are born from. In Richard Montgomery's mind, something stirred. If this story of quiet defiance and deep dignity moved you, subscribe to the channel. Watch how a single act of respect, even when uncomfortable, can shift entire belief systems. Respect has the power to change lives. Inside the pristine lobby of Montgomery Tower, glass and marble caught the morning sun. Diana stood under that light, dressed in her best but still feeling entirely out of place. A navy U dress and a pressed white blouse, both bought on clearance. Around her, passers-by wore suits that likely cost more than her monthly rent. Diana Johnson, to see Mr. Montgomery, she said quietly at the front desk. The receptionist, dressed in beige silk, studied her with polite detachment before making the call. Floor 68. Miss Winters will meet you. In the elevator, Diana took a deep breath and held her worn leather wallet tightly against her chest. She wasn't scared. The fear had been left behind long ago. What she carried now was resolve, shaped by battles far harder than this one. Miss Winters, a woman in her 60s with razor-sharp eyes and perfect posture, greeted her as Richard remained on a conference call. Follow me. As Diana walked behind her through the hall of polished floors and designer furniture, she noticed the curious stares. A black woman escorted into the executive wing. It didn't happen often. I fired you, didn't he? Winters asked abruptly once they were alone in the waiting area. Diana didn't answer, but her silence said enough. It happens, Winters continued. Big clients complain. People like us lose our jobs. People like you. You know what I mean? Her voice echoed against the cold glass. Around them, employees typed without knowing what was unfolding. Diana offered a small, resigned smile. And where exactly does that put me? Before Winters could answer, her phone lit up. We'll see you now. Montgomery's office spanned half the floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing a Manhattan skyline that looked almost surreal. Richard stood at the far end, hands in his pockets, gazing over the city like it belonged to him. Montgomery, Diana said, her voice steady, respectful. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable, tightly composed. Miss Johnson, he replied. Thank you for coming. He motioned toward a seat. Please. What followed was silence, deliberate, calculated. A familiar tactic Diana had seen powerful men use before. It was the kind of silence that makes nervous people ramble and self-incriminate. But Diana wasn't nervous. Do you have a background? He finally asked. I mean education? Dinah didn't blink. Bachelor's in Child Development, NYU. Her voice was firm, grounded in truth. Unfinished Master's in Special Education, Richard read aloud. For a moment, something unreadable flickered across his face. Maybe it was surprise. And yet you're a waitress? Sienna's voice was calm. Silly, I work 3 jobs. Restaurant, tutoring when I can find students, and weekends at a bookstore. Her tone was matter-of-fact, not defensive. Richard approached her desk, holding a slim file folder. I did a little reading about you, Miss Johnson. I'd like to understand one thing. He opened the file and hesitated. The person who danced with my son, who was she? He flipped through the pages, revealing printed photographs. That's Free Footsteps, Diana said, sitting up straighter. It's a community center I helped start years ago. I co-founded it with my sister, Zoe. We run a dance program for children with disabilities. Richard turned the page. Some of your grant funding is about to be cut. You didn't seem surprised. No, Diana said evenly. You were bound to find out sooner or later. But I'm not here to ask for your money, Mr. Montgomery. She looked him in the eye. So the real question is, why did you ask me here? Richard let out a short, tired laugh. Because Lucas invited you. And frankly, it's the fairest reason I've heard in a while. He stood, agitated. I want you to work for me. Diana blinked, surprised, not just by the offer, but by the idea of being anything other than invisible in his world. As a therapeutic companion for Lucas, he added stiffly. Even saying his own son's name seemed to cost him something. Diana noticed his eyes drift toward a photo on his desk, a smiling woman holding a child. We've hired the best experts, Richard continued. The top specialists in the country. Physical therapists, neurologists, psychologists, we've tried them all. But what happened yesterday? He trailed off as if the very words threatened to betray him. It was just a dance, Diana said gently, but it was the first time I saw him smile since the accident. That smile mattered. I didn't want a dancer for my son, Richard admitted. I wanted someone to lead him, not follow. Diana studied him carefully. Beneath the power suit and polished image, she saw a father clinging to control because he was afraid to lose what little he had left. I'll pay you 5 times what you earn now, Richard offered. I'm not used to sealing deals with money. Diana stood up slowly. No. Richard looked stunned, as if the word no was something he hadn't heard in years. I don't work for people who only see my skin or social class before they see my skills, she said evenly. And I especially don't work for people who think emotional wounds can be fixed by cutting a check. His face reddened, but he stayed quiet. You're not just turning down a job, he said. I'm standing up for dignity, Diana corrected. And for your son, because he deserves more than someone paid to pretend to care. She walked to the door, then paused. Lucas doesn't need more experts. He needs room, space, to figure out who he is. Not who the world tells him to be. You don't know my son, Richard said softly. No, Diana agreed. But I know people like him. The physical barriers are nothing compared to the cages society builds around them, the ones we pretend aren't there. She pulled a small card from her wallet and placed it gently on the desk. Freedom Steps. Tuesdays and Thursdays. 4 p.m. If Lucas wants to come, the first session is free. As she exited the room, she passed Miss Winters, who had clearly been eavesdropping. You just turned down Richard Montgomery? The woman whispered, equal parts amazed and horrified. Are you out of your mind? Diana smiled. Maybe. But I'd rather be crazy than commodified. The following Wednesday, Diana stood at the front desk of Free Footsteps just as her sister Zoe walked in. There's a Bentley parked outside, Zoe whispered, nudging Diana as she adjusted her headscarf. And you? 101. Won't believe who's in it. Diana followed her gaze through the dusty window and froze. A luxury car gleamed by the curb. Inside, Lucas sat nervously in the back seat, peering out the window. In the front, Richard gripped the steering wheel tightly, frozen in what looked like an internal battle. It's not getting out, Zoe murmured. Men like him don't show up to places like this. But Diana didn't answer. She already knew. She simply smiled, thinking of the moment Lucas looked up during their dance, that look of freedom. Never underestimate the power of that gaze. Then the car door clicked. Lucas slowly stepped out, carefully adjusting his leg braces. He took a deep breath. But what shocked everyone more was the second door opening. Richard stepped out. Dressed in khakis and a sweater, he looked oddly out of place, like he didn't quite belong in his own skin. Told you he'd come, Diana whispered to Zoe, who was still wide-eyed. He tried to dress down. It's still screaming privilege, though. What did you do? Zoe asked, barely above a whisper. Diana didn't respond, but the glint in her eyes said it all. A secret she'd been holding. Not even her sister knew the full extent. Tucked beneath her bed in their small Bronx apartment was a worn notebook, filled with years of research, observations, and plans, all about kids like Lucas and men like Richard Montgomery. And it all started with one simple thing: accepting a dance invitation. Richard Montgomery had built empires of glass and steel. But what he couldn't yet imagine was that Diana Johnson was more than just a waitress who said yes. She was a force, with a mission. His isolation, his privilege, his command of money, none of it could prepare him for the challenge she represented. Because the most valuable lessons in life aren't bought. They're Freedom Steps operated inside an old community gym, not far from the Handmade posters lined the walls with bold, crayon-colored affirmations. Your rhythm, your rules. Every movement matters. When Richard and Lucas stepped inside, children of all abilities were already moving to a steady, playful rhythm. Some twirled in wheelchairs. Others danced with prosthetics. Montgomery. Diana approached in a navy t-shirt with the program logo. No blazer, no title, just presence. Welcome. Lucas looked around in awe. A girl in a wheelchair executed a perfect spin. A boy with a prosthetic leg tapped out an intricate pattern. It's chaos, Richard muttered. Structured, Diana replied. Just not in a way you're used to seeing. She turned to Lucas. Want to join? Lucas nodded, eyes gleaming. But then he looked to his father, unsure. Richard hesitated. Go ahead, he said finally, his voice low. I'm staying right here. Diana led Lucas to the group, while Zoe turned to Richard. The first day's always the hardest, she said softly. For the parents, not the kids. This isn't therapy, Richard said, arms crossed. I hired the top rehab experts. And how's that working for him? Zoe asked gently. Just then, the gym door opened again. An older woman entered slowly, leaning on a carved cane. His silver hair was woven into a stately braid. That's Dr. Elaine Mercer, Zoe whispered. Renowned neuroscientist. Specialist in neuroplasticity. Retired from Harvard. The woman greeted a few children warmly, then froze when she saw Richard. Montgomery, she said, her tone cool. You declined my research proposal. 3 times. Richard blinked. But Mercer. I didn't expect to see you here. I supervise, she replied curtly. It's part of our research program, Diana explained calmly. We study how non-directed movement can support brain development. Specifically, how physical movement can promote neuroplasticity in children with motor challenges. Richard frowned. I thought this was just a community dance class. Diana smiled faintly, glancing back at Lucas, now playing with another child. Freedom Steps is a motor rehabilitation initiative. Our pilot program is grounded in the theory of movement autonomy, she continued. We want to bring balance to the creativity of the senior leadership team. We have seen enough with cutting edge. Then why are you working as a waitress if you're leading a research program? Richard asked. Because we're chronically underfunded, Diana replied without shame. And because people like you rejected our proposal. 3 times. She's also my assistant PhD researcher, Mercer interjected. Co-author on multiple grant proposals. Diana never finished her master's, she added. She had to leave school to raise her younger sister. But her academic theories are years ahead of their time. Mercer turned to Richard. You know who I am in this field. Richard exhaled. And from the moment I walked in here, I saw it. I saw how Lucas responded. You didn't tell me. You showed me. You think the dance was staged? Diana asked, raising an eyebrow. Absolutely not, she answered for him. Lucas stood up by choice. I simply followed his lead. A sudden stir, a cluster of reporters entered the studio. Richard stiffened. "What is this?" he whispered, tense. "Phase 2, Deanna replied, her smile subtle. Zoe handed him a newly printed research article. "Our latest study just went public." Mercer added, "The results are already turning heads in the rehabilitation field, and you used my son to do PR," Richard said coldly, voice tight as wire. "Come with me," Diana said. She led him into the next room, where dozens of children's photos were pinned to the walls. Each photo had handwritten progress notes beneath. One frame, however, remained empty. "What's that one for?" Richard asked. "Our future," Diana said. "The centers we could build, if we had support. Hundreds of kids, 1 year sooner, not 1 year too late." Richard stepped back, realization dawning. "You choreographed this." "The dance." "This meeting." "On the same day as the press release." "Yes," Diana admitted. "Because 4 months ago you canceled our meeting without reading our proposal. I swore I'd make you see it, one way or another." Suddenly Zoe called out, "Diana! Lucas!" They rushed back to the gym. Lucas was now standing in the center of the room, children gathered around. Someone had paused the music. The room was silent as Lucas carefully removed one of his braces. Richard instinctively stepped forward, but Diana touched his arm. "Wait," she whispered. Lucas inhaled deeply, his face filled with quiet focus. Then, astonishing everyone, he took a single, shaky step. It was imperfect, uncertain, but it was his. The children erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. Richard's face, usually stoic, softened. Behind his eyes shimmered unshed tears. "That's why we created Freedom Steps," Diana said quietly. "It's not about the perfect step. It's about the first step, that comes from within." For the first time, Richard didn't see his son as fragile or broken, but as a whole person discovering his own strength. "And all of this could have happened? Without manipulating me?" he asked quietly. "If you had answered our proposal," Diana replied, "you would have seen it yourself, 3 rejections ago." Behind them, the reporters had turned their full attention to the transformation unfolding on the gym floor. "Richard," someone whispered as Lucas, unaware of the surrounding tension, continued stepping forward, his face focused, determined. Richard Montgomery was cornered, not by power or politics, but by fatherhood. He had 2 choices: retreat in pride or rise in humility. He could double down, deny the moment, and assert to the press that he was still in control, or embrace the truth his son had just created. A man used to commanding rooms now stood awkwardly in a space ruled not by dominance but by freedom. For the first time, his wealth and status couldn't buy the next step. This wasn't his domain anymore. He looked back and forth between his son, beaming with joy, and a press corps eager for his reaction. Between 2 futures. Unfamiliar, uncertain. Humility had never been his virtue. But seeing the light in Lucas's eyes cracked something inside him, something long buried. The symphony of privilege and control that once played in his head was now replaced by a softer, unfamiliar melody. "Do I keep commanding or start learning?" he murmured. Then he turned toward the press, their microphones already raised. Just moments before, his son had walked unaided in front of the cameras. Deanna, calm as ever, had supported without overshadowing him. "Montgomery," a reporter called. "Can you comment on your presence at Freedom Steps today? Is it true your foundation rejected this program 3 times?" another asked. Richard glanced at Lucas, who was now still dancing, unaware of political friction. Then, to everyone's surprise, especially Deanna, Richard smiled. "Do you know what's hardest for someone like me?" he said, his voice loud enough for the room. "Admitting we were wrong." A hush fell across the studio. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward. "The Montgomery Foundation is committing full funding to Freedom Steps for the next 5 years," he announced, "including construction of a permanent rehab center. It will be based entirely on the methods developed by Dr. Mercer and Ms. Bunsen." Flashes lit up the room. Zoe gasped. Richard turned to Diana, sensing her hesitation, and added, "House condition. Diana Johnson will have full authority over the program and methodology. No business interference." Months later, bulldozers cleared the site for the new Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center. It wasn't the most glamorous project Richard's foundation had ever funded, but it was the most transformative. Every corner of the space was designed with direct input from children, parents, and therapists. Diana visited regularly, overseeing construction with grace. Lucas often accompanied her, and occasionally, almost shockingly, Richard himself would show up, quietly observing. "He's even attending board meetings now," Diana said one afternoon, reviewing blueprints. "I never imagined I'd be revisiting neuroscience journals at 60, Richard muttered, squinting at an annotated research paper. "But here we are." Diana studied him, unsure if this was transformation or redemption. "Do you actually care?" she asked. "Or is this still a performance?" "Last week, Lucas asked to remove his second brace," Richard said softly. "I knew before you told me. His old physiotherapist said that wouldn't be possible for 3 more years. "And yet you fired her," Diana reminded him. "Because I said she was wrong." "And she was." Diana pointed to a photo of Lucas balancing with only a cane. His progress defied every textbook. It wasn't medicine, it was movement. "Where, did you never apologize?" Richard suddenly asked. "Because you never did either," Diana replied. "Funding the program wasn't an apology, it was compensation." Richard nodded slowly. "Fair enough." At the grand opening 6 months later, the contrast from that tense restaurant night couldn't have been more stark. The new adaptive gym was filled with children, all moving freely, confidently, joyfully. In the center, Lucas, now wearing only a single brace on his left leg, led a short dance with 3 others. His movements weren't perfect, but they were his. And confident, proud, independent. Richard stood at the back, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. "He doesn't need your hand anymore," Diana said beside him. "No," Richard replied. "But he still needs me near." "That's a different kind of support," she said. He turned toward her. "Thank you," he said. "For what exactly?" she asked. "For teaching me how to chase something that can't be bought." A reporter approached, asking Miss Montgomery, "How does it feel watching your son today?" Richard looked at Lucas, now helping a younger girl find her balance, and smiled. "It's not pride in what he's overcome," he said. "It's pride in what he's helping build." "What's next on this journey?" someone asked. Richard Montgomery, once known only for his financial empire, looked directly at the camera. "True leadership," he said, "isn't about dragging others down a path you think is right. It's about having the humility to follow when someone shows you a better way." 1 year later, the Freedom Steps program had expanded to 3 new cities. Diana received the Pediatric Rehabilitation Innovation Award. Her method was being implemented in hospitals across the country. Lucas, now using only a light cane on his harder days, had enrolled in a regular public school and had become a spokesperson for the teen program, encouraging others to move at their own pace. And Richard? He had learned life's most humbling truth. True power isn't found in control, but in knowing when to step aside and let someone else lead. In a world where the powerful rarely change and the unheard often remain hidden, the story of Richard, Diana, and Lucas reminds us that real transformation begins when we cross the unseen boundaries that divide us. When a billionaire learns from a waitress. When a father truly listens to his son. If this story is about anything, it's about how a single act of kindness can reshape lives forever. If it touched your heart, subscribe to our channel for more. Because the most important revolutions rarely start with money or declarations. They start when someone dares to take an honest first step, and someone else is brave enough to follow. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps give light to voices that deserve to be seen and heard. Maybe the most powerful part of this story isn't about a billionaire or a waitress or even a boy learning to walk again. It's about how a single unexpected moment can change the direction of multiple lives, without permission, without warning. One small gesture, one honest response, and suddenly the walls we build between race, class, and ability begin to crack. Vienna didn't wait for permission. She didn't ask if it was her place. She saw a boy reaching out and reached back. And in doing so, she gave a father something that wealth had never offered him, the chance to truly see his own child. Because the most important steps we take in life aren't the ones others plan for us, they're the ones we choose to take for ourselves. Lucas didn't just take a physical step that day. He took a step toward independence, toward confidence, toward owning his own story. And Richard, for the first time, stepped out of control and into humility. Not because he was forced to, but because he was finally ready. We often talk about leadership as being first, being strong, being unshakable. But real leaders? Real leaders are the ones who follow when it matters, who listen when they could command, who change, even when they don't have to. Freedom Steps was never just a program. It became a movement, because someone dared to say yes when silence was easier. In a world chasing headlines and power, maybe what we truly need are more people willing to say, "You lead. I'll walk beside you." So if this story has moved you, not just because of what was done, but because of why it was done, then maybe it's your turn. Not to fund a building, not to change a nation, but to notice someone and act. Because real revolutions don't start with policies or millions. They begin when someone makes the first genuine step and someone else has the courage to follow.